If I'm right and there's 6 elements of prose, there's description, inquisition, reflection, revelation, action, and expression. I really like having a plan for everything. And I usually break that down into like elements and stuff. Like so my channel is primarily about archetypes. That's the big thing that I explore and stuff. But it's all about breaking stories down into their elements. Like, what are they?
Right.
And recently I've been doing prose. And so breaking down prose into its different elements, because when I was in school, I remember learning the structure of a sentence. I don't remember learning how to construct a good sentence to convey things.
Yeah. You
right?
learn the basic rules, but not how to do it well.
Right. Like you learn which one is the verb,
right.
Which one is the adverb. You don't learn take 2 sentences side by side. This is a good sentence. This is the better version.
But they
of the
say
sentence.
The same thing.
But they say the same thing. Maybe it's flowery words. Maybe it's whatever. But it's like, this tells the point. Or even better yet, a paragraph. Like this sentence plus this sentence plus this sentence. Same information, but over here it's told better.
Right.
You know. So I didn't learn that, and maybe they did teach that. You know, I'm going to give my English teachers the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention in English class, but I don't know who else was. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out how to break prose down into its different elements, because that way you learn what you're working with. So I think I've narrowed it down, Brendan. I think I've narrowed it down to 6 elements of prose. Okay? So let me know if you think that there's more, if I'm missing something.
If it's all crap.
Let me know your thoughts.
It's all crap.
If it's all crap. It very well could be. Okay, so the 6 elements of prose. Number 1, description. Okay, so you're describing things and whoever's describing it, they are describing it. The next one is inquisition. So asking questions. It could be an interior wonder. It could be the narrator begging the question to the reader, that kind of thing. Number 3, reflection. Okay, so this is your character. Something happened to the character. The character recalls that thing and then reflects on it and forms their opinion or their view of it.
Or plan or whatever, you know.
Whatever it is, yep. Number 4, revelation. So, learning something. There is now new information given, okay? The next one is action. Somebody does X. They swing the sword, okay? And then the last one is expression, okay? So expression is an action based on your reflection. Right?
Okay.
So I don't know all of these things, and if there is like an actual list of like the elements of prose out there, somebody please type it in the comments and let me know. Send us a link, something.
Well, I think there's 2 ways of looking at prose. There's the like technical way. You're looking at it more though as the story way.
Right.
So what was the first one again? Let's talk about that one.
The first one was description.
Yeah. So I think this is where most writers don't have too much of an issue, because I think it's the easiest one. It's the easiest thing to start with, of like, especially if you're doing fantasy and everything is, you have to explain everything. It's really easy for your writing to be like 80% description. The building looked like this.
Right.
The stones were white. The sword was long and made of steel. You know, like all of those things are natural and easy for you to put in. But it is an essential part of you have to have description in your prose, especially if you do fantasy. If you do historical fiction or you do something like that, it's in the real world. Less description is required to understand what it looks like. Whereas in fantasy or sci-fi or otherworldly stuff, if you don't tell them, they don't know what it looks like. Like, they don't know what they're supposed to imagine. It's like, you write a character for 20 chapters and realize you never said it was a dwarf. So,
right.
And so they would never...
Changes the
Yeah,
context.
they would never know that it's a dwarf or an elf or something until you actually tell them that. And then... So, it's essential. The question is, how do you do it well without boring people?
And that's where you always hear show, don't tell. If you... Like, the tell part is description. But there's 5 other elements that are all about show.
Right, and actually, if we can have a slight tangent, I've decided that I push back pretty hard against the show don't tell thing, and the reason is
that's a spicy take.
So I'm gonna spicy take coming here soon. I don't believe in show don't tell, and the reason I don't believe in it. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have show don't tell. Obviously, you need that. I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is, I feel like we put too much emphasis on it. Every single book, like, I think this is hard. This is a hard take for me to explain.
You're gonna have to defend yourself.
Yeah,
hard.
no, I'm willing to do that. So if you look at something like Lord of the Rings or like older literary works, they're much slower. There's lots of description. They're just like, reading The Hobbit, there's action, but it's not all show don't tell. There's a lot of telling in old books like that, in older stories. I feel like the emphasis on show don't tell comes from the fact that our modern society is so fast-paced, and we want our movies fast-paced, we want our books fast-paced. Like, everything has to be fast, and everything has to show you and not tell you. But sometimes it's okay. Like, I guess my real point is we've become afraid of just telling. Sometimes you just need to tell, and that's okay.
Just have a character tell a story about the history of the world, and it's okay.
Yeah. Like, it's just not like I like that stuff. If I read a book and I get into a bit of telling, I don't go, ooh, I like that stuff,
Right.
And especially like Lord of the Rings is the most famous example of it. You read the beginning of The Hobbit and it's like, concerning hobbits. And then it's just like a chapter about nothing other than just telling you what hobbits are. And it's endlessly fascinating.
Yep.
There's no showing. It's mostly all telling. Like, hobbits do this. Hobbits don't like wet, grimy holes. They live in good, clean places. That means comfort.
Comfy homes.
They look like this, and they eat this kind of food. And he's just telling you about the hobbits, and everyone loves it. So that's my point. I'm not saying, like, obviously you need to show things, and you need it. I'm not saying that the advice isn't invalid. I'm just saying we put so much emphasis on it, and it's unnecessary.
Right. It's like the new trendy thing.
And now here comes me being destroyed by the comments.
Yeah.
This is going to be a short that you put out that I'll just get destroyed in, but that's how I feel.
Yeah,
I'm fine with it.
Here, I gotta go close a blind really quick, so keep people entertained.
Okay. Everyone go to Pokemon Quest. Me and my daughter do Pokemon stuff. We have a whole family of Quest
really
YouTube
fun.
channels. Author Quest, Writing Quest, Gamers Quest, Pokemon Quest, Film Quest. Check them out. So back to where we were. I talked a lot about show don't tell there with my spicy take, but I don't know where we were before that.
So we just talked about description, like how there's if I'm right and there's 6 elements of prose, there's description, inquisition, reflection, revelation, action, and expression. there's description is just one of the 6, and that's the tell of the show don't tell, right? Mm-hmm. So the next one is inquisition. So you need to have somebody somewhere asking questions, which also implies that you need to have information that people don't know.
Yes.
Okay. So there's the subtext.
And you have to have a reason for the character to want to learn that information.
Right.
And that's where I would point to, like, Abby Emmons always talks about internal conflict. Mm-hmm. And so, and actually this ties to Ahsoka. So I was talking about how, like, you could replace her, you could put any other character in there and replace her, and the story would be the same. Mm-hmm. And this is what that is. There's information to learn, to know. Mm-hmm. This character needs to find that information, but there has to be an internal reason for the character to want this information. Mm-hmm. And it has to be specific to your main character, because, like in Ahsoka, they want to find Ezra because he's their friend. Well, that applies to all of them.
Right.
It doesn't apply to just Ahsoka. So there's no reason for Ahsoka to go on the journey alone. To go on the, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like Greatest Showman. There's information, like, he's trying to get to a certain place, but it can only be him.
Right.
You know?
Because he is the greatest showman.
Yeah, it's directly tied to his circumstance, because he wants to make something of himself and he feels like a failure. And so if he doesn't make something of himself, then he will fail at life. Like, that's his internal conflict. He has to prove himself. And so, but his wife doesn't feel that way, and his kids don't feel that way, and the people that work for him don't feel that way, and Zac Efron's character doesn't feel that way. It's only his character feels that way, so therefore the story happens to him.
Right.
Do you understand? Like, it's a very distinct thing, but in Ahsoka, the challenge is we all love Ezra and we want to save Ezra, and we want to stop Thrawn because Thrawn's bad. That applies to everyone.
Yeah, everybody wants that thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make you care specifically about Ahsoka, I guess.
Yeah. Dang.
I
just had...
Throw it.
Well, so here's the thing, is, like, I have a lot of thoughts on Ahsoka, but this episode is not about Ahsoka.
Yeah. But that's just a good example, you know. You could go to, like, back to Lord of the Rings, like, Aragorn has... Like, the journey of him becoming the king of Gondor can only happen to him. Mm-hmm. It can't happen to Boromir. It can't happen to Faramir. It only happens to him. And his fear is, I don't know if I'm worthy. I don't know if I can do this. Mm-hmm. You know? Or I don't know, like, the fall of man happened in my line. I don't want to be the one who continues that.
Right.
Well, Boromir doesn't have that. Denethor doesn't have that. Like, it's just him. Same with Frodo. Like, his journey is his journey. Like, so that's why you care about those characters actually going on their specific quests.
Right. It's almost like, sorry, this is a whole other tangent, but I just had a theory. So everyone's theorizing that Anakin is now the new father character, and then Ahsoka's the daughter, and then
from the Mortis gods,
and then Ezra's the son, right? Mm-hmm. If that's true, that's great. Love that. That'd be awesome. But to tell that story, instead, it would be better if Ahsoka's call to action was Anakin coming to her.
Yes.
First.
Now it's specific to her.
Now it's her. It has to be you. You have to stop Thrawn. It can't be anybody else.
Well, but it should come about. So what Ahsoka really should have been about, the main thread of it, and I think this is what they tried to do, but it just didn't quite happen. She should have been trying to reconcile her past. Mm-hmm. That's the story. I am the apprentice of Darth Vader.
Yeah.
and her dealing with that tragedy. And then somehow that translates into finding Ezra. But they kind of, instead of that being the main story thread, they just kind of added it as a bit of a side story thread that kind of happened to her. Like, you know, she dies and then falls into the world between worlds, and then it happens. But up until that point, it's not part of the story. So
where she needed to realize, no, you're not the apprentice of Darth Vader. You're the apprentice of Anakin.
Yes, it's a slight shift that's subtle, but it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Man, I'm really getting a glare on my face right now. Look at that. You see that?
You're fine.
Yeah, that would be a much better way to do Ahsoka.
Yeah,
man,
that's a whole
that's a whole video, man.
That's a whole thing, but it's a good example of some things. So
yeah. So okay. Continuing onwards. How much time we got?
Yeah, we got a few minutes.
Yeah. So description, inquisition, like asking those questions, reflection, revelation, action, and expression. Part of the reason, like, I think that we could go deeper into these, and I probably will at some point. But for the sake of time, I'm going to get into this next part about it. The description, in my head, this is the order that it happens in, and you can skip it, right? You can skip bits, but there's description. You ask a question about it. You reflect on it. You have a revelation. You do something about it, and you express something about it. You know what I mean?
And to me, that feels similar to the Dan Harmon story circle.
Right. But it applies to the actual elements in the words, you know.
It applies to how you actually write the story. So you're writing this. So I understand what you're saying. So you start with description, you go through all these different things, and then you come back to description, but you're in like 15 chapters later.
Right.
And then you do it again. Like, so it's this kind of cyclical thing through the story.
Right. And even, you know, the Abby Emmons scene cards, right? So if you're thinking...
I built them into my Notion template.
Well, there you go.
I have lots of videos about it, actually.
Oh, well, great. So I think that it could even be in a beat of a story, you know, in like the cycle of prose is just constantly happening.
Yeah.
And it's happening for different characters, you know, but yeah, think about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things about, you know, because like the scene cards are like, you have the setup, and then you have the tension, and then you have a bit of a crossroads, and then you have the decision and the outcome.
Right.
So, like, again, it's a cyclical, which the reason I latched onto that, and I think actually this works for this prose thing too, is it keeps everything moving well. You know, like her scene cards are designed to like keep pushing you into the, like, makes you want to read the next chapter, because you're doing this cycle of like setting things up, asking a big question, and then getting to the next setup and asking a question. It's just this constant cycle. But I think what you're saying is, like, if you can also do that with the actual prose as well, you can add even more of that keeping people reading.
Well, it's not so. It's keeping people reading, but it's understanding how to execute it really well. So when I work with archetypes, plot archetypes, you know, with all of the stuff. When you're working with those, they're beats, and you say this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and the character thinks this, and then does that, right?
Right.
With these elements of prose, in theory, you could take a chapter that you've outlined, say, right? You know what's going to happen in this chapter. You know that they're going to be in the big city. There's going to be a battle that breaks out, and there's going to be this character and this character in it, right? in theory, you could take, what are all the elements that I have to describe here? So I need a description of the city. I need a description of the people that are fighting us. I need the action of what actually happens. I need the character to think this about it. Like, what are they reflecting about it? What are the questions that they ask? And you can write all those down.
It's kind of like a checklist of what you need to have in the prose, and then you can actually come up with all those things beforehand and then plug them in.
Right. You could literally write the prose out as you normally would when writing, and then you could just piece it all together. So
I like this.
Right? So before you're even like, okay, I need to sit down and write this chapter, you already have the noble language of Anakin sprung from his seat and he slashed down the battle droids. You already know that you need that part. It's just
just write it already.
Already.
Yeah. So okay, because so one of the things that I struggle with, and maybe this solves my problem, is just sitting down to like write linearly can be hard.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm like, okay, I need this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, I need this piece of dialogue, I need this thing to happen, you can just write those all individually, put them in order, and then glue them together.
Yep.
It's a lot more of a systematized way to, you might have just changed my life, Aiden.
So if you take archetypes, right? So I breaking down stories into archetypes and all of their plot points. This is essentially taking each plot point and breaking it down into all of their individual beats.
Yes.
Of the story. And
then you're breaking down those story beats into, these are the prose elements that need to be in there.
This is the language that I want to use.
Whoa. Having a brain baby.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm telling you, I'm not crazy. And I looked around. I haven't seen anything like this before. So it's still all developing. Let us know down in the comments what you guys think.
Yeah, sorry, our thoughts on it are a little vague because this is kind of my first time I'm encountering this idea.
But and that's kind of the point, is like, this is an underdeveloped thought process, and I'm going to do a lot more research, and I'm going to be making more videos about it, because it is changing the way that I think about prose. Because, when you're doing your character, when you have a plot and you have your character sheets, right, and you have their arcs maybe or whatever, and you're like, well, this character is a 42-year-old male blacksmith. His wife died in the war, that thing. Why not just write, I want to have a description. I want to have him saying how his wife died.
Right.
In his words.
So you can just write that.
And then you just write that.
And then decide where to plug it in.
Exactly. And you can label it one of these 6 elements, and then later you can just be like, well, I need a description for a thing. You go to your character, you click on the description. I'm just thinking like how I would organize this as in my internal wiki. Like,
yeah. Aiden, you might have changed the writing game, not gonna lie. Kind of blowing my mind up. So, yeah, we're gonna have to talk about this more. But we are running out of time. So
oh yeah, we are running out of time.
Let's wrap it up for this one. So you have some stuff for sale.
Yes, as you can see behind me, I have been publishing my character plots, my character plot archetypes. So it's not just the descriptions, but it's also the most common plot points that you would see in different character archetypes. I mean, I've got everything from the Avenger, the Smuggler, the con artist, the Wildman. I have the artist. There's so many of them, and they really do all follow a trend. And not to say that you can't change them, like they aren't malleable. But if you want to write the anti-hero, there's a very clear way to make them an anti-hero. And
right.
like to the point of they aren't an anti-hero without certain aspects. What are those aspects? And I put them all together. and you can find them on my Gumroad store.
Nice. Which will be linked down below, I'm sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Brendan, for coming. This has been Author Quest. Make sure you subscribe and comment down below, everybody that's watching. Thank you
definitely.
for giving us the time.
I want to hear some comments. I want to know what people think about this whole prose idea, because I need to know how I think about it. So I need them to tell me what I think about it.
I'm just waiting until like someone's like, duh, it's this theory that was made by this person in the 1820s or something like that.
We think we're mind-blowing, and then someone's like, you guys are idiots. I'm like, sorry.
Which just goes to show that we're on a quest to become authors, you know?
Yeah.
Like we're still there.
That
Lots
is
to
the
learn.
truth. Cool.
All right. Well, I will see you later. Huzzah!
Huzzah!